Hello and welcome to CRE Corner. I'm your host, David Fuller-Watts, and in this episode, we're talking about de-siloing the landlord and tenant relationships in CRE spaces. We're going to talk about how the tenant and landlord relationship has changed over the years and what's driving that change. We're going to dig deep into the importance of data and the way landlords and tenants are using that data to help elevate retail experiences. To help me unpick this topic, I am delighted to be welcomed by Mark Bruce, the former Retail Director at Republic and then at Meadowhall for British Land and Data and Insight Director for Kinexio. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, David. Nice to be here.
So where do we start? There's been a 10-year history between you and I, and now you finally ended up joining Kinexio, and we've just launched our new data platform and AI-powered sales collection portal. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to fill the audience in on your background and your journey in the industry and what's led you to Kinexio. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you a question we ask all our guests on CRE Corner, which is, what's your favorite commercial building and what does it have that's so memorable to you?
I'm going to be really boring and I'm going to have to say Meadowhall. It was a privilege to work at such an iconic destination, and despite floods and pandemics and all the challenges that we had over the years of working there, it's just one of those places that it gets under your skin. But I think it's a good example of how one of the UK's big retail destinations has adapted over the years, but also stayed relevant and successful. So yeah, boring answer, but Meadowhall.
I think we'll probably talk a little bit about that more in line with the kind of tenant and landlord relationship. But yeah, interesting. So tell us about your background, where you started in your career and the exciting journey that you've been on that's led us to Mallcomm now.
Sure. I hate to use the cliche journey, but it is the best description of how I came to be where I am today. So going way back, it was 32 years ago, operating stores for Primark, River and Republic. I like to say on the front line, running shops and selling gear and a proper retailer. And I think that's been critical to where I am today because it's given me the ability to really get a depth of knowledge and an understanding of how retailers work, what they need, and the retail industry as a whole. So thoroughly enjoyed my time working, as I say, on the front line in various roles. I worked from store manager up to retail director. We were doing international store openings, property acquisitions, along with the day-to-day operating of the business. The opportunity that arose to join the world of property management. So I joined British Land and the team at Meadowhall. I held the role as retail director, which later expanded into a role with the British Land Insight team, developing their data and unlocking insights across the portfolio. 12 years at British Land. I saw a lot of change over the years. And I think it was after working in the operational side and the property management side, it does give you a really unique perspective and the ability to see things from both sides of the table. What was clear for me from the outset was the difference and also the commonality between the two roles. And looking back, it was really about how retailers and landlords, certainly way back, just spoke a completely different language. And there was not an awful lot of collaboration. And I experienced that firsthand. Then, fortunately, the opportunity came up with Kinexio. And I saw this as the perfect next step. So it was how to take that knowledge and experience of working on the front line as a retailer, but also having that knowledge and understanding of a property management business and how we could try and blend those two and create better relationships, understanding and collaboration. Yeah, so very excited to have joined and really excited to handle the challenges that are coming up over the next couple of years, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's really good to have you in the team. And I wonder if we should just go back a step. I imagine things have changed a little bit since when you were effectively a retailer, I hope you don't mind me saying that, to being the retail director at Meadowhall and the impact that you had there. It'd be really interesting, I think, to understand that kind of change in dynamic and the way in which that tenant and landlord relationship may have changed and the impact of change that you had on it.
Yeah, sure. I think there's probably two outstanding themes that come from it. So when I started in commercial real estate 12 years ago, the landlord had very little information and data to understand the performance of the property, and they needed to acquire more. And secondly, there was definitely a change needed to view the tenant, I think, as a customer rather than just an occupier that paid rent. And this was really evident to me when I joined the property management industry, and it was quite disconnected. The relationship wasn't great. Landlords were quite frowned upon by retailers, and I certainly felt that way when I was a retailer. Landlords were difficult to deal with, very closed, very private, and you often felt that they didn't really understand the needs of a retail business. I think also what's happened is retailers over the years, they've raised the bar of what they expect from a landlord. And with the requirement that landlords think and operate now more in a retail mindset. So that's definitely changed. And I think retailers, as they have advanced with their technology and data, and they now have a really deep understanding of their customers, landlords have had to keep pace and are trying now to keep pace to develop quickly and ensure that they're speaking that same language. So the leasing deals have changed over the years, and I think that's forced some of this change as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, because a lot of people always ask me, why do you think this change has happened? And I appreciate this is a UK experience in the most set, but do you think that the lease structures are forced change, or do you think the change was inevitable anyway?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the world has changed. I think if you look at the way that brands now engage with customers, they're a lot more open and transparent in terms of their ethics and all around ESG. So I think there's naturally an expectation that people work more collaboratively. But you're right. I think there is also this forced change coming from leasing. So the old lease where a landlord simply charged a base rent or a rent, that has changed significantly, both in quantum and dynamics. So modern leases now, you've got turnover top-ups. Even more popular now is turnover only deals. And they're a good thing because what they're forcing the retailer and landlords to do is to work together, because it's almost like sharing the risk of opening the store in that location, but also working together on the opportunity. And that has to involve sharing of data and being collaborative.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting point on that. And of course, a lot of that changed during COVID.
Yeah.
There's a lot of retailers left the ecosystem and a lot of space got created. And therefore, I guess that started to also impact that change on the real estate and landlord and tenant relationships as well, do you think?
Yeah, I think COVID brought retailers and landlords a lot closer together. Suddenly we had something to handle in the world that we'd never, ever come across before. And every day, retailers and landlords were learning on how to handle this situation. In many cases, shopping centres were opening and closing on numerous occasions. And suddenly you had to communicate, you had to work together, and you had to try and solve these problems together, even down to managing occupancy levels and capacities, things we'd never thought we'd deal with. But it definitely cemented that relationship and just highlighted how important it was.
Yeah, and it had to change the way landlords thought. They needed to suddenly get access to information and then distribute that information a lot more. And I suppose that started to change the way you thought when you were at British Land and at Meadowhall in particular. But talk through some of the things that kind of changed through that period and the way in which the landlord and tenant relationship evolved. You were also, if I'm right, going through a bit of construction work at that period. So maybe let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I guess from the day I started at Meadowhall, it was clear there was a huge opportunity, but also a huge challenge. And that was really how we acquired the right information and data at the right time. And secondly, trying to change this terrible reputation that landlords had and actually treating the occupier as a customer and building this sense of community. Fortunately, Kinexio was around, and that was my first big initiative. We were hand delivering memos to 300 retailers, quite simply in a language that they didn't understand at a time that was wrong, and it was never getting the right information to the right people. So the first solution was to actually come up with a platform that would really just streamline and make our whole communication a lot more efficient. Secondly, the best way to describe it, it was like running a department store when you don't know what's selling. We had a super regional shopping destination and we had no idea really where the sales were coming from. So again, working with Kinexio, we developed the sales collection piece, and that enables us then to acquire that sales data from the tenants. So all of a sudden, we were actually finding ourselves working closer and closer with each of the occupiers. We understood their business. We almost were moving into a consultancy-based scenario where, because we had the information, we were actually approaching tenants and offering them support when we saw that they were distressed. We had the communication platform where we were giving them the right information at the right time, and that was actually genuinely supporting their business. And that was the foundation, really, to where we got into the next stage. And I think when COVID came along, that, again, like I said earlier, really just took it to another level. All of a sudden, retailers were looking to us for advice. They were looking to work with us. As I say, we were opening and closing the centre through various different stages of lockdown. And it was all around the communication and all around a shared ownership of the challenge and how we were going to get through this together. And over the years, I think what we managed to do was we really did transform that relationship. So we were not the evil landlord that simply was there just to put up rent. We were the landlord that provided a genuine service to the tenant. We moved to a phase where we were surveying the tenants, asking for feedback and reacting to that feedback, much like a retailer would with their own customer. And that again enabled us to just grow further and further. And I think the information that we got from retailers, a lot of people said to me, they'll never give you the sales data. And the answer is they will give you the sales data if there's value that you can give back. So we would share footfall data at 6 a.m. in the morning so they could adjust their staff scheduling and respond to trends. We would give them insights back on product category performance, customer demographics, so they could adjust their stock packages. And it was a real partnership. And it built that sense of community and just an open and honest relationship, which meant that we were in it together. And it was a fabulous journey.
Some of those things you just said are like mind-blowing for a lot of landlords, the amount of data that you were sharing with retailers and retailers were sharing with you. What were some of the barriers to that in the first instance, and how did you build up from the Meadowhall way to then the British Land way, and then actually moving that now into the work that you're doing at Kinexio for our other customers?
I think probably the 3 C's, and that's the secret really. So it's communication, collaboration, and community. So I think what we were able to do was we used the right language. We moved from property management and almost an estate agency type language to actually communicating with retailers in a way that they would understand. So it gave a lot more empathy to the things we were communicating. And that could be anything from we needed to inspect the unit, that we were closing a service yard, or at times we were doing things that maybe weren't the right things for their business, but they were essential maintenance for running a centre of that scale. But we communicated it in a way that we did everything in our power to make sure that had as little impact on their business as possible. The collaboration was a really interesting piece because that was again about building that trust and that relationship. So yes, there was a number of retailers that were lease obliged and they had to provide data and they had to do certain things, but we worked very much on a basis that we were about getting retailers to work with us because they wanted to and they could see the value in that and what we could do together rather than working in silos. And then lastly, what that did was it built that sense of community. You know, all the retailers felt they were part of making that destination a success. And that was because we provided such value back to them, but we also listened to their feedback and then we adapted our offer and how we worked continuously. And I think that's the secret. There's a lot of good landlords out there that are doing good communication and they've got some good initiatives. But unless you understand the retailer and the customer, and unless you've got an effective platform and you can deliver that information at the right time to the right people, it's very difficult to get that last piece, which is that sense of community and deliver the whole picture, basically. So yeah, it was a challenge. Certainly when we extended Kinexio across British Land, there was a lot of education to do with the teams, but we had a lot of best practice and we had a lot of information that we could share. And it was very much around changing mindset. And as I said earlier, looking at the tenant as a customer and how we deliver a service to them using the tools that we had available.
So you've talked about mindset really, and I like that aspect, thinking about yourself in terms of not just as a property manager, but as a what's useful to a retailer. I think mindset is a big part of what a lot of our customers and a lot of landlords try and achieve. But I think a lot of people worry that they don't have enough information or they don't know what to share. And are there any kind of practical examples that you've got where property managers can do more to build that trust with retailers? Because it's very easy, I would say, for retailers to have a cynical view on, well, you're just trying to take my sales data, so why would I give you that? That for me is really interesting.
Yeah, I think it starts literally at the beginning of that relationship. So when you're sat in a room and you're talking to a prospective tenant, and it might be a new entrant to the market that's never worked in a destination that you operate. So using a super regional shopping centre, it has its own unique idiosyncrasies. And the relationship starts at that point where you've got the ability to sit down with that retailer, understand their business, and provide them with the information that they need to open their store. And that's everything from seasonality to footfall information, trading patterns, information on the customer demographics so that they can get their product offering right. And I think that starts that relationship exactly on the right foot. So it's giving the retailer the data that they need to set themselves up to succeed and open in that destination. And I think when you start with that conversation, it almost just sets precedent to how this relationship is going to work going forward. And it's going to be a collaboration between the landlord and the data data and the information that they have around the destination, but also sharing the knowledge that retailer has of their own customer. And putting those two together is then the secret to that success. I think once that retailer opens, then it's again having a different view. So rather than just saying we've leased the unit, we've got them paying rent and we've locked them in for 3 years and you walk away, it's actually then saying, no, actually, after 8 weeks, let's get back to that retailer. We've got their sales information. We can see they're struggling. Let's sit down with them and let's talk to them and let's understand how we can support them more. Perhaps targeting a bit more marketing resource in their direction, offering them some advice, almost working as a consultant because you understand that location better than they do, and actually supporting them along that journey.
Yeah, that to me is crucial, right? You actually have to give retailers something they don't already have. And I suppose that is really based on that particular store in that particular location and how that is impacting against and comparing against other stores or of that category. And this is something that I know a lot of real estate companies are investing quite heavily into, their data strategies. So that leads us on nicely to the work you're doing now and, of course, the launch of our new data platform and AI-powered sales collection portal. What are you seeing in terms of the ability to get this type of data and insights into the hands of all landlords and therefore all retailers? And that kind of thought process shift from give me your data and I want to do something with that for my business to a more collaborative and predictive element of the future of insight within real estate?
Yeah, I think data is a dangerous thing and it can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot of information out there. And I think a lot of landlords are overwhelmed. And it's how you take that data, analyze it, gather the insights, and then actually get that back to the people that matter in a way that's going to give them the right insights to improve their business. And the great thing with the sales collection portal is that it was all about, for me, how you gather that data in the most effective and efficient way. So make it as simple as possible for the retailer. They're busy. They don't have time, more so than ever now. So a very simple way of allowing them to provide that data. Secondly, reducing the resource that's needed from the landlord to collect that data. And things like the AI tool is a good example where we can actually now allow the retailer simply just to email the data. If that's the way they want to provide, who are we to tell them otherwise? But they can email that information to us. The AI tool will scrape that email and ingest that into the system. And it's a good example of how we're using technology now to make our lives a lot simpler. And what we do then is we take all that data and pull that into our data platform. And the data platform is really where we bring that alive. And it's using that information to give the data back to the retailer in a format that is actually going to inform them and add value to their business. So imagine a world where a retailer can open up one dashboard and they can see exactly which days of the week their trade maybe was less market share than other days. They can look at staff scheduling. They can start to look at what the footfall might be next week so they can change their rotas and bring in extra staff. So it's a genuine tool that's going to help that retailer manage that unit. And then from a landlord perspective, not only is it then understanding that retailer's performance so you can see who's in distress, but maybe you've run a marketing event or a promotion the prior week, you've spent £50,000 of service charge to deliver that event. And what you need to do is work out the impact. And what the data platform will do now is it will very quickly identify where the additional sales have come from as a result of that marketing event and the footfall and generate a genuine return on investment. So you can view which retailers benefited from the marketing, which retailers didn't, which product categories saw growth, which didn't. So you can tailor that event next time to make it more effective, but equally share that information back with the retailer and the tenant. So those that got involved can see that you're delivering some really impactful events. Those that didn't get involved want to get involved next time because they're missing out here on an opportunity, which is a really nice example of how it joins that circle of why that data and that sharing is really important. The other thing is really it's starting to use the information that we've got of the asset and understanding what of that information is valuable to the retailer. And there's a lot of information that isn't, but there's an equal amount of information that is. So back to what I said earlier, giving the retailer an understanding of the catchment, the demographics, the footfall trends, perhaps how their peers are performing. We can do that now in an anonymized way, which is unique. So it's about how we extract the insights. And I think from a landlord perspective, the information now and the power of that sales information is really just untold, because what you can do is, if you imagine, you can look at your whole mall, understand how each retailer is performing, identify where you need to improve their performance. Maybe that's twofold. That might be through support in marketing, or perhaps they're the wrong brand for that asset, and it's simply they need to be replaced with another brand that's going to resonate better with the customer. We can provide that now in one dashboard to provide really fast, simple, effective views of performance. Secondly, the other thing we can do is it's about how you get that information back to customers and retailers. Certainly what's been a challenge over the years is giving it back in a way that's easy to access and secure. And what Kinexio does, which is great, is it understands everybody that works at an asset and the level that they work at. So we can make sure that we deliver a dashboard, for example, back to the manager of Nike with insights that are unique to that manager, so they can really operate their store. But we can also streamline the reporting process up. So if you've got a property management company with a lot of monthly, quarterly reporting, stakeholders and investors, it's using that sales data to give a really clear picture of how the asset is performing and where the opportunities are. The one example I like to use, it's almost like having a group of assets that are good, but what the system does is show you how to make them great. So it shows you where those opportunities lie, whether it's through driving additional footfall, sales, or changing your marketing strategy. So it's about just squeezing that extra degree of return out of an asset.
Yeah, and that's interesting because retail real estate's recovered pretty well, actually, in most cases. And therefore, spaces are at a premium. A lot of the best shopping centres themselves don't have big vacancy rates. So a lot of the data analysis that you're talking about, I'm assuming, is not only to understand how to improve retailers, but also understand early enough which ones perhaps we need to replace and get the right tenant mix in and who to replace them with, so we can start that process as early as possible.
Yeah, totally. I think retailers over the years and landlords have changed. So retailers have changed. They're very much looking at quality over quantity. A retailer now will open 5 stores in super premium destinations rather than having 50 stores across the UK. So they're very particular in where they're going to open their next store. And landlords, as you say, you're dead right, they're the same. Space is becoming limited, which is great. But what's essential now is making sure you choose the right tenant for that location. So from a retailer's perspective, the data now allows the landlord to actually market that unit with proper intelligence. We're able now to say to a brand, open a store in our centre because we estimate you'll do X turnover, you will be successful, and we've got the analytics to understand the customer. And that again helps with that first conversation. The second thing then, let's say you have a unit, but you've got 6 prospective tenants, all willing to pay market rent. What's difficult is to choose which of those tenants is going to be the right one. And what you've got to look at now is not just the rental income, but it's looking at the brand and also modelling. And that's, again, what data allows us to do now. So you can take the risk out of decision making and actually model the centre to say, okay, if we put a restaurant in that location, what do we expect that to do to the turnover? What rent should we be charging? What is the cost in terms of the retailer, in terms of their OCR, but also what rent to sales will that generate? And using a little bit of science, it does de-risk that decision. And it means you're making the right decisions, which is so important now, actually, especially now that the space is becoming a lot more premium. So yeah, it's using that data, but again, both sides, it's sharing some of that data back with the retailer to get them to engage at the outset, but then it's using that information to help you make that right decision to take some of the risk out of putting the wrong tenant in the wrong place.
And that all adds to the collaboration aspect, right? Sometimes it's hard to be collaborating with retailers that are just the wrong fit, or maybe they were just in the wrong size of base for their particular offering. Just to wrap up on this topic, we've obviously released the new product sets this year. What's coming in 2025? What's the future of this?
It's moving at a pace and it's exciting. Technology allows us to do so much more. We're looking at lots of different tools. We haven't mentioned ESG much on the call, but we can't probably finish the call without mentioning ESG. And I think we're moving to a point now where, again, energy usage to us is data, and it's how we take that data and we look at it and gather insights. So we're already working on solutions where we can collect meter reading information, for example, but look at that in terms of how it's being used, offer advice back to the tenant on how perhaps to use it better and be more efficient, creating league tables, incentivizing retailers to reduce their energy. And to be honest, in the future, we may even move to a point where there's green leases, where we're actually linking that energy usage into the rent that we're charging, and we're offering rental subsidies for some more green retailers that we've got within our assets. The other thing, I think what we're starting to look at now is the visualization of the data. We're not only able now to visualize the data we're collecting, looking at a UK map and actually laying data on top of asset locations to make it really simple to make decisions, but we're fast moving now into overlaying that data onto actual mal plans. So again, rather than looking at tables and tables of data, is to be able to literally heat map a mal to show where the opportunities and where the risks are. So it's really exciting, actually, how we can take data now, and lots of data from all different sources, actually really simplify it and give it back to all stakeholders, whether that's retailers and customers, in a way that's going to help them manage their business. And I think lastly, all the other products that we have within the Kinexio platform, I can see a future where we're providing a dashboard back to a landlord that gives them a real high level view of how a tenant is performing and how that performance is linked into things like compliance, energy usage, health and safety, sales, and also even engagement. And there is a direct link between all of those KPIs, but having all of that in one platform is the future. But having that in a platform that gives you the right data and allows you to make those quick decisions, that's how you use data, I think, now and going forward, especially when there's the volume out there is, but simplify it and get the insights from it effectively.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think as we start to talk about utility usage and the impact that has on energy usage across a portfolio, is really interesting how we can start to standardize that aspect across portfolios, maybe across even different geographies and countries. This is all pretty advanced. Just to finish this off then, if a landlord or property manager was looking to start this all off, what would be your first tip to start the journey? Like from your retailer days, your initial days at Meadowhall, what would be the one top piece of advice that you'd give to start beginning on this?
Understand your customer. I think you've got to understand the occupier. So how they operate, what they need, when they need it, and how they work. And that is the secret. I think once you understand your customer, it then enables you to put the right solutions in place and make the right decisions. And I think certainly what I learned on my journey was to start with a very simple solution and then build on that over time. Don't run before you can walk. Take the retailer on that journey with you, but definitely embed a culture into the business that the occupier is a customer, and actually providing a service to them is the number one. And once you've done that, you will then start to find there is a common goal and a sharing and collaboration and community. But understand the customer, start simple, but have a very clear roadmap of where you want to get to.
Yeah, sound advice. Thanks, Mark. It's been great to have you on the podcast. I'm sure you'll be asked for many more inquiries and questions around the data platform. It sounds really exciting. We're really excited about it and excited for 2025. Good to chat to you.
Thanks. Great.